He found himself sitting inside the restaurant he owned, yet he felt like a stranger, hungry, unnoticed, and silently judged by the very employees who worked for him. The only person who showed him even a flicker of warmth was a young waitress who had no idea she was serving the founder of the place. Gregory Lancaster, the head of a nationwide dining corporation, had spent 30 years building his culinary empire. What had begun as a humble family bistro had evolved into the Lancaster Grill, a collection of upscale restaurants spread across the country. His establishments attracted wealthy guests, executives, celebrities, and families accustomed to top-tier service and a premium atmosphere. But despite the success and prestige surrounding his brand, something inside him had begun to feel wrong. Complaints had started trickling in, first a few scattered messages, then more frequent reports. And soon, a clear pattern appeared. Guests claimed that his restaurants treated people who looked less affluent with coldness or outright disrespect. Rumors circulated about staff members ignoring customers who didn't seem wealthy or weren't expected to leave big tips. Gregory had always believed that great hospitality mattered just as much as the quality of the food. If his restaurants were failing at that, it wasn't just bad business, he felt personally responsible. One night, inside his penthouse in Phoenix, Arizona, he read a new complaint. "I went to the Lancaster Grill yesterday hoping for a calm dinner. I wasn't dressed up, but I was ready to spend money. The staff looked at me like I didn't belong there. No greeting, no smile. I waited 20 minutes before anyone even acknowledged me, and when they finally did, they made it obvious I wasn't important. I left embarrassed. You need to do better." Gregory let out a slow breath and set his phone on the counter. He hadn't built his life's work for it to become known for arrogance or discrimination. He needed to see what was happening with his own eyes, and he knew exactly how to do it. The next morning, he dug through his closet, pushing aside luxury suits until he found an old flannel shirt and faded jeans. He put them on, feeling strange and unfamiliar in them. He added a few final touches, a worn baseball cap, a beard he'd let grow in, and a pair of scuffed sneakers he hadn't used in years. When he looked in the mirror, the polished CEO was gone. In his place stood a tired, struggling man who looked like he could barely afford a warm meal. To make the experience realistic, he left his wallet at home and brought only a few wrinkled dollar bills. If he wanted an honest test of his staff, he couldn't rely on his wealth in any way. Instead of calling his driver, he took the bus. People glanced at him with impatience, the way strangers do when they assume someone is poor and wasting time. By the moment he stepped off at the restaurant, the sun was sinking, reflecting off the pristine glass exterior of the building. This was it. He pulled his cap lower, inhaled deeply, and walked through the doors of his own restaurant, but this time, as an ordinary man. He was not prepared for what followed. The atmosphere changed as soon as he entered. The Lancaster Grill embodied everything a luxury restaurant should: warm lighting, elegant black and gold decor, and the rich aroma of steak and truffle butter floating in the air. Servers dressed in flawless uniforms moved gracefully between tables, delivering gourmet dishes and perfectly poured wine. But beneath all that beauty was something else, an invisible social divide, lingering like a shadow. Gregory paused at the entrance, quietly studying how the staff treated the guests moving in and out of the dining room. A sharply dressed couple was welcomed with warm smiles and escorted to a table almost instantly. A man in an expensive suit barely muttered a greeting before a waiter pulled out a chair and handed him a menu with polished elegance. Gregory, however, received a very different reception. The blonde hostess behind the podium, mid-20s, flawless makeup, looked him over from head to toe. Her eyes lingered on his worn shirt and battered shoes. No smile. No greeting. Not even the smallest hint of courtesy. She simply asked, in a flat, impatient voice, "Can I help you?" Gregory nodded. "Just hoping to get some dinner." Her eyebrow rose sharply. "Do you have a reservation?" He almost laughed. He knew the reservation book was packed, but he also knew there were always exceptions for people who looked wealthy enough. Still, he played along. "No reservation," he admitted. "But maybe there's a table open." She sighed and tapped her screen, her deep red nails clicking against the glass. It'll be at least an hour. Gregory glanced around. 3 empty tables sat untouched, tables that, from experience, he knew were held for guests who looked like they belonged. Before he could speak, a deep voice interrupted. I'll handle this, Jessica. Gregory turned to see a broad-shouldered man in a crisp shirt standing behind the podium, arms folded. His name tag read Manager Stephen Callow. Jessica stepped aside, clearly relieved. Stephen gave Gregory a quick once-over, then forced a professional but empty smile. As my hostess said, we're fully booked tonight. You might want to try another restaurant nearby. Gregory didn't move. I don't mind waiting. Stephen's jaw tightened. There was something in his eyes, annoyance, maybe even disdain. Sir, this establishment maintains a certain atmosphere. Most of our guests come here expecting a specific experience. If you want something more casual, there's a diner a few blocks. That was the dismissal. Expected, yes, but still unpleasant to feel up close. Gregory kept his expression even. He wasn't going to argue, wasn't going to pull rank. He was here to observe. To let them reveal themselves. Before Stephen could continue, another voice broke in. I concede him. Gregory turned, and for the first time that evening, someone actually smiled at him. She was young, mid-20s perhaps, warm brown skin, dark eyes, a quiet strength about her. Her uniform was neat, though she carried a tiredness that suggested long hours and little rest. Stephen frowned. Jasmine, we don't have any. The table by the window is open, she said calmly. I'll take him. She didn't wait for permission. She picked up a menu, motioned for Gregory to follow, and guided him past the stares and murmured comments of the other staff. Gregory had no idea how far her kindness would go, or what price she might pay for it. He settled into the chair by the window as the murmur of conversations filled the room. Jasmine placed the menu gently in front of him. Would you like something to drink? She asked softly. Gregory scanned the prices. He already knew them, but pretending to be someone counting every dollar made them feel heavier. Even the cheapest wine cost more than some people earned in an hour. Just water, he said quietly. If that's okay. Jasmine didn't hesitate. Of course. She returned with a tall glass. Take your time. Let me know if you have any questions. Gregory didn't know how to respond. All around him, other servers floated from table to table, offering polished smiles and charming conversation to the wealthy guests. None of them even glanced his way. Except Jasmine. When she returned a few minutes later, she leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. I hope I'm not overstepping, but if you're unsure what to order, I can bring you something small on me. Gregory felt a tightness in his chest. He could easily afford anything here, but for a moment he let himself imagine what it felt like to truly be struggling. You don't need to do that, he murmured. I know, she said simply. But I want to. Before he could argue, she walked away. She returned moments later with a warm bowl of soup and a piece of fresh bread. The serving was modest, but it had been arranged with the same care as every other plate leaving the kitchen. Gregory paused before tasting it. The soup was smooth and flavorful, perfectly balanced. The bread was warm, soft, almost melting. But it wasn't the food that struck him. It was the gesture, the fact that a waitress, likely working long hours for barely livable pay, had chosen empathy over prejudice. His eyes drifted to her name tag. Jasmine. He committed it to memory. Before he could say anything, a sharp voice cut across the dining room. Jasmine. A moment. Stephen, the manager, stood near the kitchen doors, arms folded, irritation carved into his expression. I'll be right back, she whispered, then walked toward him. Gregory watched them step aside. He couldn't hear every word, but bits of the conversation reached him. You're wasting time. He's a customer. Barely. Everyone deserves respect. Stephen's face tightened, and he shot Gregory a pointed look before muttering something and marching off. Jasmine returned a moment later, her smile gentler than before, and asked softly, Is there anything else you need? She didn't mention the argument. She didn't complain. She simply continued her job with the same steady kindness. Gregory observed her quietly. She had no idea who he was, no idea she had just stood up for the one person in the room who had the authority to change the entire course of her career. But soon she would. He sensed a shift the moment she walked away. Her kindness hadn't just been unusual. Here, it was clearly unwelcome. At the front, Stephen was murmuring with Jessica, the hostess. Every so often, both glanced in Gregory's direction. He wasn't imagining it. He had sat in enough corporate boardrooms to recognize when people were quietly discussing someone. When Jasmine returned, she brought a small plate of butter and extra bread. "Just in case you're still hungry," she said with a warm smile. Before he could thank her, another waiter approached, a young man with slick hair and an overly forced grin. Sir?" he began, trying and failing to sound polite. "Just a heads up. If you plan on ordering a main dish, we require upfront payment for certain guests." The phrasing was deliberate. The meaning wasn't subtle. Gregory met his gaze. "Certain guests?" The waiter swallowed. "It's just part of our policy sometimes." "No, it isn't," Jasmine said immediately, unable to hold back. The young man blinked, startled she had spoken up. "Excuse me? We don't make customers pay before they eat," she said firmly. Across the room, Stephen watched with arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Gregory set his spoon down. "Let me guess," he said calmly. "You don't ask him to pay first." He nodded toward a man in a custom navy suit sipping expensive wine. Silence. The waiter glanced toward Stephen, hoping for backup. The manager gave a subtle shake of his head, an unspoken order to back off. The young man forced a weak laugh. "Never mind," he muttered, retreating quickly. Jasmine let out a quiet breath, then turned back to Gregory. "I'm really sorry about that," she said softly. "It shouldn't have happened." Gregory didn't answer right away. He simply looked at her. In her eyes he saw exhaustion, the kind carried by someone who had spent too long apologizing for things that were never her fault. "How long have you worked here?" he asked. Jasmine hesitated, then sighed. "Almost 2 years. And do you like it?" She gave him a small, bittersweet smile. "I like the customers." That told him everything he needed to know. Before he could respond, Stephen appeared beside the table. His smile was practiced, but his eyes were sharp. "Jasmine," he said with forced patience, "I need to see you in my office." Jasmine glanced at Gregory, her shoulders tense. "Of course," she said quietly. She followed Stephen toward the back hallway, disappearing into the small corridor near the kitchen. Gregory sat very still. The soft hum of conversations continued around him, cutlery clinked, and the sizzle of cooking drifted from the kitchen. But he heard none of it. His mind was fixed on one thing: what Jasmine was facing behind that office door. She was being reprimanded, maybe even threatened, for simply treating him like a human being. For defending him against humiliating policies that should never have existed. His jaw tightened. This wasn't a one-day problem. This was a culture problem, one that had grown inside his own company while he had been too distracted by expansion and quarterly reports. But power, he reminded himself, had a unique advantage. It could change everything in a single moment. And tomorrow, everyone in this restaurant would discover exactly who he was. The next evening, the Lancaster Grill opened its doors as usual. Staff hurried about polishing glassware, arranging silverware, preparing for another busy night. No one suspected that today would be different. At precisely 6 o'clock, Gregory Lancaster walked through the front doors, not in the worn, stained clothes from the night before, but in a tailored charcoal suit, polished shoes, and an unmistakable air of authority. Jessica, the hostess, straightened immediately. Her expression shifted from the mild annoyance she often wore to a bright, professional smile. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Lancaster Grill." Gregory didn't acknowledge her. His eyes scanned the dining room, searching for one person. "Jasmine." She was setting a plate down at a nearby table when she glanced up. Recognition hit instantly. Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. She understood now. She knew exactly who he was. Murmurs spread across the room like wildfire. Waiters whispered, glancing nervously at the sharply dressed man near the entrance. Even Stephen, who had just stepped out of his office, froze mid-step. Gregory began walking toward the dining room, his footsteps calm, deliberate, unhurried. Every eye in the restaurant followed him. Everyone who had ignored him, dismissed him, or acted as if he didn't belong now stood perfectly still, watching. Gregory stopped directly in front of Stephen, who had gone rigid. "Mr. Lancaster," Stephen finally managed, forcing a tight smile. "What an unexpected visit! If I'd known you were coming, we would have. Do I look like someone who needs special treatment?" Gregory cut in, his tone controlled but sharp. Stephen faltered. "No, sir. I just meant." Gregory didn't let him finish. He shifted his attention to the employees gathered around. "How many of you knew who I was last night?" Silence. No one moved. Jessica swallowed nervously. The young waiter who had demanded upfront payment stared at the floor, as if hoping it would swallow him. Gregory let the silence grow heavy before speaking again. "I came here last night for a reason," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "I'd been receiving complaints about how certain guests were being treated in my restaurants. So I decided to see the truth myself." The tension tightened like a wire. He turned back to Stephen. "And what I witnessed," his voice dropped darker, "was unacceptable." Stephen's face drained of color. "Sir, I can explain." Gregory raised a hand. "There's nothing to explain. I watched my own staff look right through me. I was treated like a problem. And the one person who showed basic decency was punished for it." He looked toward Jasmine, his tone softening. "You defended me when you didn't have to. Even when speaking up might have cost you your job." Jasmine opened her mouth but closed it again, overwhelmed and unsure whether she was about to be thanked or reprimanded. Gregory continued, voice steady. "You were the only one who remembered what this restaurant was supposed to stand for, respect." Then he took a small card from his pocket and handed it to her. Jasmine hesitated before taking it, her eyes scanning the bold text. "Promoted to general manager, effective immediately." The restaurant fell into absolute silence. Jasmine's breath caught. I don't understand." "You don't belong waiting tables," Gregory said gently. "You belong running this place." Across the room, Stephen made a choking sound. "Sir, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," Gregory replied, turning to him. "And you are fired," Jessica gasped. The young waiter's mouth dropped open. Stephen stuttered. "Mr. Lancaster, please, I've been here for—" "You're not a leader," Gregory interrupted. "Leadership takes integrity. And I don't promote people who mistreat their staff and drive away paying guests." He turned toward the rest of the employees. "I strongly suggest all of you reconsider how you treat people. Because starting tonight, things will be different." His words settled like a new law. Jasmine still held the promotion card, hands trembling. Her eyes lifted to Gregory, teary and disbelieving. "But why?" she whispered. "Why me?" Gregory gave her a small, sincere smile. "Because when nobody else did, you saw me. Now it's my turn to see you." And just like that, the Lancaster grill would never operate the same way again. The room remained frozen. No one dared to breathe. No one had expected this, especially Jasmine. Gregory watched her stare down at the card again, the weight of her new reality slowly sinking in. I don't know what to say," she murmured. He chuckled softly. "Say yes." Jasmine blinked, as if expecting someone to reveal it was all a mistake. "But I've never managed a restaurant," she confessed. "I mean, I know how things work, but—" "You know how people should be treated," Gregory said, cutting her off. "And that matters more than anything else." Jasmine swallowed. All her life, she had been overlooked, passed over, treated as if she was invisible. And now the owner of the entire company she worked for was looking her in the eye and telling her she wasn't just capable, she was the right person for the job. Her voice wavered. "You're sure about this?" Gregory's expression softened. "Jasmine, I've led this company for years. I've made more money than I ever imagined. But last night you reminded me why I built it in the first place. It wasn't about wealth. It was about purpose. About building something that treated people the right way. If I can't trust someone like you to run this place, then I've already lost sight of what matters." Her eyes shimmered, but she blinked the tears away and straightened her posture. "Then, yes," she said at last, voice steadying. "I'll do it." The staff didn't know how to respond. Shock. Unease. Guilt. Especially from those who had brushed Gregory aside the night before. They all sensed a shift in the air. Change was coming. Gregory turned to Stephen, who still stood frozen, jaw tight. "You can start gathering your belongings," Gregory said evenly. Stephen's lip curled. "This is absurd," he muttered. "All this over some random waitress?" Gregory's eyes hardened. "She has a name. Jasmine. And that's exactly what separates you from her." Stephen swallowed whatever comeback he had and stormed toward the office. Jessica, the hostess, quietly stepped back, suddenly reconsidering every decision she'd made in the last 24 hours. Gregory let out a slow breath and turned back to Jasmine. "You begin tomorrow. But for tonight," he nodded toward the exit. "Take the evening off. Celebrate." Jasmine hesitated. "If you'd prefer, I can finish the rest of my shift." Gregory laughed softly. "Jasmine, you're in charge now. You don't need my permission anymore." The reality of it hit her again, deeper this time. A smile spread across her face, hesitant at first, then warm, proud, and fully earned. Gregory watched her go, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Then he faced the remaining employees, his tone firm but calm. "This restaurant changes today. From now on, every guest gets the same respect, whether they walk in wearing a suit or a pair of old sneakers." Some staff nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. Some were already deciding whether they wanted to stay. But one thing was certain. The Lancaster Grill would never run the same way again. And as Gregory stepped out into the cool night air, he realized something else. It wasn't only the restaurant that had been transformed. He had changed too. Some people show kindness only when they expect a reward. But true kindness, the kind that shifts the course of someone's life, happens when nobody is watching. Jasmine had no idea who Gregory was when she defended him. She didn't do it for praise or recognition. She did it because it was right. And that had made all the difference. So the next time the opportunity comes to choose kindness, take it. You never know whose life you might touch. Or who might be quietly watching.